So in part one of statistics, we looked at the idea of true and useless information. And the fact that almost everyone in Sweden has an above average number of legs is not particularly useful. But it is true. And what you've got to watch out for, not just in school but in life, is for when people will try and throw information at you and get you to make a quick decision that is not fundamentally sound. So let's take a look at a case now. Okay? And apologies to those of you who hate sport, but sport is a fantastic world to do this, and we're going to look at cricket. To understand this, you do not have to know anything about cricket. Okay? If I said to you the word googly and you go, I've got no idea what that is, it doesn't matter. This is just about thinking through with common sense, but doing those layers of thinking, those layers of the onion. And we're going to look at two players, player A and player B. Okay? Now both these players are batsmen in cricket teams. The question I want to ask you is, which player would you choose and why? And then what I want you to do is ask me any questions you want to ask in order to work out anything else you need to know about these two players. So, player A, here are his scores for his last 5 games. And here's player B. So, what I recommend you do at this stage is you pause the video and do some thinking. You want to come up with. You might want to do some analysis, and you will probably want to prepare some questions for me to help understand what more about these players, because what you've got here is not everything. And remember, some information is useless, or it can be useless if you don't have the facts to back it up. So, pause now, and then I'll talk you through some basic analysis afterwards. Now here we go. I'm sure all of you in that time, or even already before then, have either got out your calculator or by hand worked out how many runs both of these batsmen scored. And the answer is they both scored 150 runs. Now, it doesn't matter what a good number of runs is in a game. Okay? We're going to do this without any of the cricket context. We're just going to talk in general. So who do you want for your team? Often, 65% of people say player A and 35% say player B. Now, that is a made-up statistic. That's not true. But that's my point. Statistics are misleading. So, without having any made-up statistics, why would people choose player A? Well, some of you will have said things like this. Some of you will have said more consistent. Yeah? And things like always scores a fairly good amount. Well done if you've done that, because those are good, straightforward observations. And in life, consistency can be a valuable trait. Now, remember, this is statistics, and we're talking here about analysis of data. So phrases like this are good starting points, but over time we're going to want to develop something much more specific and precise. And there are some very complicated maths techniques which we'll look at later on, where you can actually explain consistency using numerical analysis. Now, what about people who chose player B? Well, here's the thing. Player B has two big scores. So some people say player B is a match winner. And what they mean by that is when player B plays well, the team has a good chance of winning. Whereas player A's study scores always keep them in the game, but never perhaps push them over the edge to winning. So for example, imagine you were a famous sprinter and you ran the 100-meter race. Would you rather have a time that's consistently would put you in third place, or would you rather have a time that sometimes just puts you in first, and then sometimes when you have a bad day, you come down as low as like sixth? Some people will say, I'll take a bronze medal every day. That's great. Some people go, do you know what? I've got a chance of gold. Now, this kind of decision is a value decision. Okay? There isn't a right or wrong answer to that question. But what we can do is look more and more behind the layers of the data in order to try and work out what the best value decision really is. So, now the question for you is, because you've heard the basic arguments and you've seen, quite conveniently they've scored the same number of runs, which player would you rather have in your team? Which player is the most valuable to your team? Now, this kind of data is called secondary data because it's been collected for you, and therefore there are things you may not know about it. So take a couple of minutes, pause the video, discuss it, and think, what do I need to ask in order to work out who to pick? So if you're unpausing now and you've got some ideas, let's talk it through. Okay? First thing. Okay? I want to get to know these two players. So, a really good question that someone asked was, are they the same age? Okay, interesting question. So here's what I'm going to tell you. Player A is 32 years old. Player B is 19 years old. Even after one question now, your brains are starting to go, well, the older player being more consistent is a good sign. But the younger player does have these higher gaps. Does it cost the team more when the younger player does badly than when this player does well? Well, maybe you're thinking, if the 19-year-old gets more consistent, maybe in the future he'll start scoring really big in these 3 games. Maybe you're thinking, this 32-year-old might be getting towards the end of his career, maybe he's going to start to decline. If you look at what's typically called an aging curve for sports performance, you often see it does something like this. So at very young ages it's improving, there's a peak somewhere in your mid-20s, and then as you get older it then starts to decline. So performance goes up as your age increases and then it drops off. So is that going to happen here? Well, we don't know, but it's got you thinking, hasn't it? Okay then, next question. Did they play in the same games as each other? The answer is no. These two players have not been playing for the same team. Okay, now I've got your brain thinking. So you're now thinking, have they been playing at the same level of competition, perhaps? Well, the answer here is no, but the answer is it varies. So, in this situation, this player has played in League 2 for all 5 of his matches. Player B has played 2 games in League 3 and he's played 3 games in League 1. Now you can see in League 3 he's been amazing. In League 1 he's really struggled, or so it appears. So, who does that make you want to choose now? Okay. Now a cricket fan asks a question now. In any of the games, was the batsman not out? So did the game end before a player had a chance to score more runs? So if you bat second and your team reaches the total, the game stops. In fact, player A was not out in his last 2 games. So he could have scored more. I can see your brain shifting towards player A now. But wait a second. Player B also had a not out game. Okay, so now we're starting to go, this is more complicated than it looks. What was a really simple example at the start of consistency versus big match player now is really different. You're trying to work out how player B would do in League 2 as well, because the fact you haven't got a comparison is really hard here. Now, there's also something else you need to ask. Okay? And a really astute person came up with this. What about injuries? Now, it's a really great question. Really great question. And unfortunately, we do have an injury here for one of our 2 players. Player B. Was injured for these 2 games. So now all of a sudden, maybe you're thinking, well, 2 really high scores in the low level, one where you can't tell. Player B might be a top youngster. So what are you going to do? Now, just in these few questions, trying to peel back the layers of the onion, what we've discovered so far is that actually nothing is clear, nothing is simple. We can go further into this and we can look at not just the league they played in, but the quality of the teams they played in those games. Also, we can look at how quickly they scored their runs, because that may be an added benefit. There are so many factors involved in a decision that just looking at one piece of information is really quite dangerous. And what you end up with, if you do that, is something that's true and useless. Now, I know what you're thinking. What you're saying to us here is, we'll never get the right answer. It's not possible. Well, it's not about getting the right answer. It's about moving towards a good answer. And that's also about time. If you go to a shop and you're trying to decide between 2 different products, because you're trying to work out which is the best value, it doesn't matter if one banana is 5p more than the other. It's not a big deal. But if you're talking about a big issue for society, like for example, climate change or Brexit, These are big deals. And this is where you need a bulk of information. You know, maybe you're sitting there talking about Messi versus Ronaldo. Well, you can't make that discussion happen without peeling back the layers of the onion. So hopefully you found this interesting. What we've now got to do is start to equip you with some tools in order to do this. And we're going to start very basic and build our way up.